Hello, and thank you for joining today's special webinar by the National Organization for Rare Disorders on fundraising in a pandemic. This webinar is part of our COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series. My name is Debbie Drell, and I am NORD's Director of Membership, and I will be your facilitator for today's webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We had almost 300 people registering for this webinar, the first in our series. All lines are muted except for our speaker. This call is being recorded and will be made available shortly after the webinar with a link posted to our COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series webpage. If you are one of the near 700 leaders of our 320 member organizations, you will also receive the webinar recording link in our weekly e-newsletter just for our member organizations. We posted there, and we also posted a special Facebook group for our members. Want to learn more about NORD's membership for nonprofit organizations? Well, I'll tell you about our team. NORD's membership team is working for you. During this call, an issue raised or topic discussed may prompt you to think of a question that does not get specifically addressed within the hour. NORD's membership team is always available to help you answer any of your questions after this event is concluded. I encourage you to reach out to us by emailing membership@rarediseases.org. Many of you have shared with us that COVID-19 has substantially impacted your organization, your rare disease nonprofit. COVID-19 has created obstacles for fundraising, for clinical trials, for support of your cause. Specifically, the rapidly changing demands of your infrastructure, including crisis communications, telework, cancellation of gatherings, conferences, and fundraisers. This has absolutely directly impacted your ability to fundraise for your mission. And we heard you. NORD launched the COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series to meet those emerging needs. We have expanded our current capacity building and membership support services to you, leaders of rare disease organizations. And we have created an education and resource series to become more agile and operate in this new environment. These resources are usually developed for our members only, but because of the coronavirus and this unusual circumstance, we have opened it up to everyone, including any rare disease nonprofit organization or any nonprofit organization that has found us and found our resources. It is available to the general public. So the agenda is here on the slide. After a very brief introduction, you will hear from our keynote speaker, and we will see how much time we have after her presentation for a question and answer period. Regarding the Q&A, we have collected questions in advance. You have the ability to submit questions through Q&A, and if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can use the Q&A button at the toolbar, which is usually at the bottom of your window, unless you've moved it. So you can see what that looks like on the agenda slide. You can ask a question, and we will flag your questions. Some of the questions will get answered during the course of the webinar, but if it's a unique question, we will definitely see if we have time towards the end to answer that. There is a chat option, and if the chat is too high traffic, we will probably just focus on the questions officially and formally submitted in the Q&A. So for some of you who are not familiar with NORD, we want to tell you welcome, and these resources are here for you, and it's a part of our mission. NORD is an independent nonprofit. We are leading the fight to improve the lives of rare disease patients and families, and we do this by supporting patient organizations and patients, helping them accelerate research, provide education, disseminate information, and drive public policy. If you're a member of NORD, you know that we have lots of resources available to you. And during this pandemic, it is also, when it relates to COVID-19 response, it is available to all rare disease nonprofits. So I'm really excited to pass the virtual microphone to our keynote speaker. Before we bring Heidi online, just want to say she is wonderful. She is offering a wealth of knowledge. She is sharing some mysteries and secrets of nonprofit fundraising, and she brings 21 years of nonprofit development. She's worked with a wide swath of nonprofit organizations, and we have talked extensively before this webinar about rare disease nonprofits and your unique experience. So with that said, I am so happy to welcome Heidi to this webinar. Heidi, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Debbie, and Hello, everyone. I guess good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast here with me. I'm in the Washington metropolitan area, and then I guess I should say good morning-ish to those of you who are calling in from the West Coast. I know that there are some folks from California. So I want to thank you for your time. Time is the most precious gift that you can give someone, and I don't take that gift lightly. I want to also say to you, remind you rather, that you are all the lighthouse in this storm that's raging around us. I know it's hard to feel that way sometimes, but I also know that you are. I've been in your shoes in many occasions and still am really in the thick of things. But remember, you're that, lighthouse with all the water spraying around it, strong, wise, and serving as a light for the nonprofits that you work with. So in the interest of this being a good investment of your time, let's just kind of get right to it. So I say we start by dispelling some myths. Myth number one is people don't have money to give. Absolutely not true. Of course, there are circumstances. Certainly people have lost their jobs, they've been furloughed. But I'll tell you, if you want to look at a group of individuals who are still giving quite readily, and that's the retirement community. These are folks that have consistent income. They are living off of Social Security or retirement benefits. As an example, I'm on Rotary. I don't know if there are any Rotarians out there, but I serve as an assistant governor in my district here in Maryland, in the Bethesda, Potomac, DC area. And I was having a regular Zoom meeting just like this, and one of our guest speakers was sharing his need for his charity. And as a complete surprise, totally unexpected, one of our many, frankly, retired Rotarians raised his hand and said, I'd like to have a conversation, talk to him afterwards, transferred a $10,000 gift. Huge surprise, totally unexpected. People are giving. Let's think too about the friends and the people you know in the IT space, in the gaming space, in the streaming space. They're doing quite well. So is Domino's and Clorox. Anyone know anyone from Zoom or Amazon? So it's getting creative about thinking there are people who are doing well despite this pandemic, and those folks should be on our radar. You're always 6 or 7 degrees away. Another myth, you can't ask for money right now. Since when has it been deemed bad taste to ask people for money? People who want to help, people who say, I want to do something, I don't know what to do, I'm feeling, give them an opportunity to be a part of your mission. I will never forget, just after college, a friend of mine broke her neck. She's in a wheelchair today. And shortly after this incident, she ended up having her wedding. Anyway, they got married, and 9/11 occurred. So they had to postpone their wedding again. So they have their wedding later in the year. And she says aloud to everyone, this is my 9/11. So for her, in her circumstance, and I'm sure many of the individuals that you serve, we're all kind of going through something. So yes, it's an historic time for all of us, but there are people out there who want to give, and they want to give right now. Many of you may be thinking, I don't have an important need. It doesn't match up with what's going on. I have a client in the youth sports space, and way back in March, he said, I'm going to throw in the towel. I'm done. I'm toast. This is never going to work. Who's going to do youth sports when people are dying of COVID? This was March. We sat down, strategized. I got information from the CDC and HHS to put case to point that children who are better equipped health-wise to handle the onset of illness or disease are better off, right? And it makes their trajectory of their lives better. Long story short, we applied to a foundation that's located in Detroit. We got money both for a Detroit project and an upstate New York project to the tune of $100,000. So it's rethinking how you approach funders, most certainly. I had a call this morning with a foundation here in the Washington metropolitan area, the Keyfritz Foundation, and she said, listen, every funder right now wants to know what you're doing during this pandemic. That might not be what you're asking for, but be ready to let them know that answer. So I say to you, don't let that answer be, well, we pulled back because we were afraid to ask and afraid to do. Let your answer be, we kept forward, and here's how we pivoted. Here's how we corrected. Here's how we changed the way we operate. one charity, I hadn't worked with them, but I read about them. They wanted to reach a newer, younger audience. They thought this was the key to sort of getting out of this revenue loss. And they found some YouTube bloggers who kind of tied in with their mission. They did a Google search, reached out to them and sent them packets of information that they asked them to open while the bloggers were up online and live. And so they created these relationships with these bloggers as well as the entire audience of those bloggers. And right now they're 11% they're at an 11% increase in donations from March to today. That's pretty good, right? The last myth. I'm sorry, not the last myth. Myth number 4. You can't meet in person. You can't make major asks. We're all Zooming, right? We're all doing phone calls. We're all doing what we need to do to make these meetings work. All I would say to you is, if you're going to invite someone to a meeting, ask them first, do you want to meet by video or do you want to meet by phone? I'll tell you why. I met with a donor just the other day, and I made the mistake. So I want you to learn from my mistakes. I made the mistake of inviting her to a Zoom and thinking, it's late in the afternoon, I don't want to be on video. She logged in, there she is on video. I'm chit-chatting on my phone. And it's not a good feeling when you're kind of the only one to show up for the party. So lesson learned, I share that with you. If you are setting up a meeting, let them know in advance, or ask them, would you prefer video or would you prefer phone? And I'm guessing that a lot of folks right now would love to get off of Zoom. But hey, if they don't, meet them where they're at. And then sort of lastly, there's no grants out there. All the funders are pulling back. They're changing their deadlines. There's just no space for me in the world of grants. Well, I'll tell you, GreenKite Fundraising, we write a lot of grants right now, more than we ever have in the 2 years that I launched this firm. And I'll tell you, there are many grants, many funders who are stepping up to the plate. So I think we have a slide on grants. Okay, so I pulled just a few, and I would have loved to spend, as Debbie knows, all day on this, but Express Scripts is great. They do sponsorships, even of virtual events, as long as you can, showcase that it's an educational moment for that particular event. There are a whole list of corporate foundations with that link number 2. The Awesome Foundation. It's so much fun. It's an easy application. You want to get engaged with someone that you serve, or maybe one of your volunteers, and they award these every month, and it's fun. Walmart Foundation, which is pretty much everywhere, right? They have their big foundation, which gives a certain way, and it's pretty competitive. But they also have these smaller community grants. They're called local grants, and I've left you a link there. And the grant amounts are between $250 and $5,000. But here's the really cool thing. You can apply for 25 of these. And hey, if you only get 3, and let's say you applied for $5,000, that's 15 grand. And they're not hard applications, and it's a simple cut and paste. One of the ones on the bottom there is, I don't know if you saw this earlier if you're on Twitter, but the founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, said, I'm going to put $1 billion out there. And it's not just COVID. Yes, I'm going to help with this COVID situation. But when I'm done, I also have my sights set on other things. And since even taking that snapshot for the slideshow, he's since then added some other relief-related opportunities as well, including discrimination and that sort of thing. So it's keeping your ear to the ground. Helen Keller once said, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you don't make the turn. So I say to you, let's make that turn. The next slide is about pivoting. I didn't grow up in the 90s, but I was watching this show called Friends. And I don't even remember what night it came on, but I was always there watching Friends. So we have so much going on right now that it's kind of stressful and it's overwhelming at times and kind of serious too. And I'm not saying, everything's fun and funny and jokey and there's butterflies and flowers everywhere, but find those moments that you need in your day to giggle. So here's my giggle gift to you. Every time you hear me or anyone else say the word pivot, I want you to think about this video.
I just don't think it's gonna fit. Oh yeah, well come on up. Yes. Here we go. Pivot. 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 Shut up. Shut up. Shut up.
Okay. Sorry, I just had it makes me giggle every time I see it, and I hope you giggle too. I will say pivot just to get a little giggle out of you while we're watching this. So speaking of which, I've told you a little bit about me. I've kind of rushed right into this. I'm going to take a pause and ask you a couple of questions. Debbie, did you want to pull that poll up?
Yep. So we have the poll up. It's actually been running.
Oh, good. Oh,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep. So we've had all the responses, a lot of responses out of the 141 who are currently live, 108 responses. So we asked, do you have more than one person volunteered or paid dedicated to fundraising? And 61% have.
Oh, good.
Have you ever held a virtual fundraising event? And that's a little bit less, 37% had.
Okay.
1 in 5 have never done a virtual fundraiser, but they're planning on doing it.
Okay.
A little bit more, but still about 1 in 5 have not done it. They're not planning it, but they're interested.
Okay.
And 16% have not done a fundraiser and may not be interested.
Okay, so that gives me a lot of information. So I thank you, Debbie, for running that poll, and certainly to all of you who answered it so promptly.
Sorry to interrupt, Heidi. One
Yes.
more thing, which I think is an interesting question. Are you worried about your nonprofit's future? 46% were worried, and 30% are unsure.
Yeah.
So really, 3 out of 4 are worried, or they're not sure about whether they should be worried or not. So I'm going to close the poll, and that's our audience right now.
I get it, and I'm with you. And I say to you, I can't take away the worry, but I hope that I share enough anecdotal, recent experiences with you that give you a little bit of inspiration and hopefully a little bit of hope. That story earlier that I rushed through about the youth sports organization, absolutely petrified. They were filing for bankruptcy, filling out the paperwork just to close shop. He'd already told his board that this is it, we're done, and they're back up and running. So there is light in this conversation today, and I hope to continue to shed it for all of you. So let's go to the next slide. Another great example. Quickly. So Boys Hope, Girls Hope of Baltimore is one of my clients, and they are 100%, they rely on public support. They get zero federal, state, county, any kind of, government funding. So no fee for service, nothing. And they serve 16 humans, and they serve them in a setting where they're feeding them, they're putting them in private school. They're really, anyway, you can look them up. But what we did was we said, you know what, it's really hard right now to ask people for money that maybe they don't have or they're hoarding. So I said, well, let's not ask them for new money. Let's ask them for the money that they're not spending on haircuts, and ladies, am I right? $100, $125 sometimes to get your hair done if you are covering anything up. Fuel. I used to spend $80 a week going back and forth to all of my appointments. That's $80 that I'm saving and can give a portion of it to this particular charity. So anyway, they raised thousands. It was fun. It was creative. And it was really interesting to see how their stakeholders responded. We'll go to the next slide. All right, I'm going to spend a tiny bit of time on this only because it looks like at about 50% of your respondents are just thinking about it, not sure. This slide's all about platforms, if you didn't catch that with the rainbow platforms there. But I'm going to go through pretty quickly because you could really make this its own webinar, but I would like you to know about these resources. So again, let's get to it. Hopin is a really great, and to get to Hopin, I meant to do this, it's hopin.to. So it's not .com or .org, so it's hopin.to. And Hopin is a really wonderful resource for having virtual events. They have networking spaces, breakout rooms. I know Zoom does, but they pull it off a little bit better. Love Zoom. I think we're all on it. I don't need to go into that in depth. In Expo, for those of you who have the budget, OMG. In Expo, the starting price is $25,000. They do conferences for Dell and Google, and I recently took a tour of their product line, and it was just, I was blown away. If you really want to give a true experience, an online virtual experience to your stakeholder base, really look into InExpo. I can certainly send along a referral. You can just look them up. I'm not tied to them in any way. I just was so impressed. House party, fun, fun, fun. It's for a younger crowd. It's where you can get, I think it's a dozen or less people on the phone. Music's playing. Everybody's talking at the same time. It's not an informal setting, but if you have younger stakeholders, it's where they're at. It's where all the celebrities are at, the J-Los and others who are having house parties. So it's very familiar to a younger crowd. Tip jar, really cool. If you give any kind of online benefit to your stakeholder base, for example, I have a client who does art classes on Tuesday nights. I have another client who had a young person sing the national anthem for Memorial Day. You can actually very nicely put the electronic tip jar, which again, I'm going to have to tell you, to get to it, you want to go to @tipjar. Sorry about that. If you look it up, you'll just get a plethora of different spaces. But think of the car wash, where you set out the bucket and people know, oh, I guess I should put some dollars in there. It's the same thing. Facebook Live, Zoom, I'll tell you, I am a big fan of it. When we did the young person singing, we did it through Zoom. So you go to Zoom, you hit webinar, and then you can actually send it live, stream it to your Facebook and your YouTube. And what I like about sending it to YouTube is YouTube allows you to do closed captioning. It allows you to put ads on the bottom of your videos. So if you're not familiar and not using YouTube, I would say spend an hour or two taking their online courses and learn it, because it's the space where everyone's going. Twitch, I have to tell you about Twitch. I'm not a gamer, but my 14-year-old son is a gamer, so he had to tell me about it. What it is gamers are online and other gamers are watching them play. Why is it important? Because the really, really good participants, the people who Twitch, these really famous in the gaming world, Twitchers, I think you call them, what they'll do is they will give you a day. They're online and they will talk about your one nonprofit for the day. I have a charity, tiny little charity in West Virginia that raised $100,000 just about in one day from Twitch. Amazing. Look it up, figure out how you can connect to it. Global giving. You do not have to be a global nonprofit to participate in global giving. I cannot say enough good about this portal. And if you looked into it before and you weren't sure, GreenKite, my team, we've got kind of a template. We can share it with you. You can engage us around it. But here's the deal. Once you get into global giving, you have access to their millions of donors who shop online on the regular to make donations to charity. It's a really, really good portal to use. Sly Broadcast. Do you have shy board members, or are you busy all day and you can't make that phone call and you think, oh, I was only going to leave a message, but it's 11 o'clock at night, and wouldn't that be rude? Well, with Sly Broadcasting, you can make your phone messages. You can send a message to me on my phone right now, and it won't ring because I'm busy. I'm doing a webinar here. Please don't call me. But you can, and it will leave a message. So when I go to my phone, I go, I missed a call from Debbie. I'm going to listen to the voicemail. So Debbie gets what she wants. She gets to me. But she gets to me in a way that's convenient for me and convenient for her. And again, for thank you calls, for setting up opportunities to engage, Sly Broadcast is really great. Then you have to thank all of your donors, right? And you have to do it well, because if you don't know about retention, there's so much I could say about it. Retention is the name of the game. It's very costly to bring in a new donor. And in some cases, you have to make that investment. But in most cases, going back to the friends theme, you want to keep your friends, right? And so BombBomb and Loom, what's really cool, Debbie, did you just text me? BombBomb and Loom, what's really great about those two, they're pretty much the same, other than cost, is you create a video, or you have your your recipient of services, or you have your ED, or you have maybe a famous person that you're connected with, you have them say something on video like, Debbie, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the gift that you gave to my organization. I'll tell you what we did with those dollars, da 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 da. Debbie opens her email. There's no link to go to. There's no attachment to open. It opens within her email system. So very professional and very heartfelt and very easy to make. Now, let's say you have no money to do the thanking. Well, we're just going to send emails. I would say to you, emails are okay, but really try to find a way to creatively and meaningfully thank your donors. One of the things that I do, I made a chalkboard. I got a really nice frame for it, and I used chalkboard paint. And whenever I want to thank a donor or say happy birthday to one of my clients, I'll just write it on the chalkboard, take a photo, or call them and put it up. So that's the first thing they see. I've even had fun with it. I have a horse that I board, and I put the chalkboard in front of the horse and said, Artie says hello to one of my donors who I knew was a horse fan. So you can have fun with it. It costs you nothing, and your donor remembers that effort that you made to acknowledge their investment. We'll go to the next slide. So the point is, you're online a lot more. I don't think that's going to change. You've had a lot of information out there about virtual. So that tells me it's time to really make sure house is in order online. Make sure that your guide star is gold or platinum. I say go for platinum, but hey, land at gold at least. Make sure that your CRM is, up to date. If someone says, get me off this list, get them off the list. If your social media is not responding to comments or iMessages, that's a problem. So I have a checklist. I've given it to Debbie. You can download it for free. But I just wanted to spend a moment on that because it is ever important that your website, your social media, and other online portals are nice and squeaky clean so that while people are investigating you online, you look your best. Okay. Next slide. So you're walking down the street. You've got your BFF to your left. You're having this deep conversation and you want to be a good friend. You're listening and intently as he or she tells you some amazing story about their life. And then you go, oh, look at the penny. I found a penny. Shiny pennies are very distracting. Very distracting. We all do it. You feel like little kids. I got to pick up the penny. But it disrupts whatever it is that's going on. And so I just shared with you in super fast speed a lot of information. What I don't want to do, and this is my pause, my sort of message to you, is don't fall for every shiny penny. Find the things that work for you and your mission, things that you can develop a comfort level around. If you are completely uncomfortable in TikTok, don't jump into getting a TikTok page for your nonprofit because a board member told you to do so. And if you're a board member, think through, I'm going to say to you, think through that your team, your mission needs focus right now, and it needs to perfect the things that will earn them an immense amount of community respect, but also will allow their donors to feel comfort with them right now. Everyone's watching. That's the other thing I'd like to say. Everyone's watching. And so the folks that have pulled back and gotten quiet, I urge you, start talking. Start saying anything about what's going on, about what you're doing, about how you're surviving, because no one wants to put money into a sinking ship. And you're not sinking. You're not. Remember, you're a lighthouse. You're not sinking. You're a lighthouse. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. If you don't plan, you plan to fail, right? So here's what I'd say. If you haven't done this already, this is a fun exercise, but beyond that, it's very, very meaningful. And I've asked all of my clients to do this, and I would ask the same of you. So you grab a big whiteboard, or you get those Post-it whiteboard sheets and put them up to a wall. And you do them in this order. It's kind of important that you do it in the order. So the first Post-it is you answer, what did we do last year? Fundraising. What did we do that worked, and we can still do it step by step exactly the way we did it before. Then, what did we do before that now post-pandemic we have to change slightly? And then list off what those changes mean to you. Do they mean increase in staffing? Do they mean investing in a software? Do they mean, what do they mean to you? Then I want you to think hard on what did we do before that really doesn't work? Some of the things that you just answered may end up on that list, and that's okay. So, but list it out. Don't think it's a waste of time and not do that slide piece, that whiteboard piece. Then the last one is, what one new idea has presented itself that helps us fill a gap, isn't an overarching big reach for us, and it's something that we can really focus our energy on to replace those things that no longer work for us, right? And I would also say, put dollars, when you're doing all of these buckets, put dollar amounts next to the ones so you know what your return on investment was, so you know what's at stake. Not just what you raised, but what you put into it, because maybe, just maybe, you'll find that you're a little relieved. Some of these new opportunities or some of these tweaks that you make may actually have a greater return for you, as opposed to, for example, the large gala, the large in-person conference. Okay, next slide. All right, I didn't tell Debbie I was going to do this, but I am going to do this. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the front end talking about myself because I wanted to get right to the meat of it and also leave plenty of time for questions. However, I am very happy. I turned 2 in January. GreenKite Fundraising did. And I am curious if any of you have ever made the connection between GreenKite and a childhood story that is symbolic to me and my organization. I wonder if GreenKite conjured up anything for you. And if you're the first to answer it, and I'll let Debbie know what the answer is, then I will send you a book that I love. I didn't write it, but I love it. It's called Engagement Fundraising, and it's all about those relationships. Kites. Really cool thing about kites and hot air balloons as well is they don't stay stagnant. Someone has to pull that kite up into the air, and you need a little bit of wind. You have to, as they say, lean into it. So that's why I love kites. That's why I love this quote by Winston Churchill. Here's a little bit about what my organization is doing and can do for you if you're interested. And of course, we'll have some contact information at the tail end of this. I have whizzed through this. But again, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So Debbie, I think the last slide gets us to that space and time, right?
Yep. So thank you so much, Heidi. This was a really incredible presentation.
Oh, good.
So many practical tips and strategies and a lot of hope for those who are not sure whether or not they want to go virtual, and those who are overwhelmed by the vast options for virtual platforms and TikTok and what can you do. I think this is really a helpful presentation. What I've been seeing in the online chats as well as the Q&A is the question again and again, where can I get the checklist, the recording and the slides? And just to reinforce that we will all be posting that information on our COVID-19 webpage, which I put a link on the chat. So if you click on that link, you'll see the COVID-19 Rapid Response Leadership Series, and we will have it listed under Fundraising in a Pandemic. So right now, this is the link to register. You'll see the next one is Crisis Communication. So going back to our presentation, that's where the resources are. And Heidi, thank you so much for sharing that. We did have a couple of questions, and one of the questions that I think is helpful, what advice do you have for a rare disease organization that just incorporated right before COVID-19 and is now trying to develop a fundraising plan in this unusual time?
Great question. Great question. I would say for an organization like that, first of all, congratulations. It is hard work to get that off the ground and then also have the vision and foresight that this is something that's going to be needed. So I would say a couple of things. So let me start out with, obviously you want to develop a plan, and I think you clearly know that, but I would say stay away from writing too many grants. A lot of the grant funders tend to want to see a reputation for either in time of of providing these services, but also they want to see other funders before they're able to make or want to make their investment. That's not to say that there aren't some funders that will accept new nonprofits, but here's the deal. I'm only 2 years as a consultant. I was a frontline capital campaign major gifts fundraiser for all those other years. And the thing is that since I've been in consulting, I've seen more and more nonprofits like yours that are smaller or startups frustrated because they put all of their resources either in an external person, or they themselves were writing all these grants, and then they're going, oh, I never got one grant. That's because that's not your space right now. It's just not. So what your space is, it's your board and getting your board to essentially crowdfund for you on and offline. Certainly you can utilize some platforms, and you certainly have to educate the community about what you're doing, and more importantly, why you're doing it. But I would say to you, stick to those individual contributors for now that will help you amplify your mission, and get out there a lot. There's a lot of noise right now, a lot of noise. If you want to have your message heard, you have to step on top of the box and grab the bullhorn. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Heidi. We've got a couple more questions coming in. And a lot of people who are trying to figure out the mystery of GreenKite. So we'll see. I
think I see that. Is Whitney the first one who said what she said?
I
think so.
Yes.
Okay. So it's Mary Poppins. And in every Mary Poppins movie, there's a green kite. Even the newer versions. So the famous song, I won't sing it. Was not given the gift of song voice, but no songbird. But there's a "Let's Go Fly a Kite," and it's just very hopeful. And I'll tell you, I am the type of consultant who, like Mary Poppins, fly in, and I do what needs to be done, and then I fly away, even if the organization says, no, stay, we really like you. I like you too, but you shouldn't have a consultant in your shop forever. This should be a temporary thing. You should be so strong after I leave that you don't need me anymore. So Whitney, you're getting yourself a book. Make sure I get your contact information.
So if Whitney emails you, we'll know.
Sure.
Whitney,
that would be great.
Yep.
That would be great.
We've got a couple more questions, and that song will be forever stuck in my head today. No problem, though. I love it. So Jamie asks, we're a startup nonprofit for ALD, adrenal leukodystrophy, and we've already raised $30,000 in 1 week just with Facebook posts. And we are so excited about hosting our first event, even if it's virtual. I just wanted to pass on some great news. So it's basically a shout out for ALD, but there's something to be said about Facebook fundraisers.
Absolutely. First of all, congratulations. That's so exciting and so amazing. Can I say a little tip about Facebook or two? And I'm sure they know. I wish they were sitting in my seat so they could share their success. Feel free to keep adding to it so we can share lessons learned. But bravo. Two things that I really want to make sure everybody's doing. If you're managing a Facebook page, your Facebook page, and you see people liking, your posts and things to that effect, you can go in and invite them to follow your page. Just one quick button, you click it and it invites them to like your page. As you know, on Facebook, anyone can see and like your stuff, so long as the privacy settings aren't restrictive. And we miss out when we don't invite those people who kind of like what it is we're saying. The other piece is, and we did this with a really teeny tiny, speaking of startup, I managed their social media for a month, and I noticed that there were regulars, I'll call them, groupies, if you will, who were liking and commenting on just about everything. There were, a handful or so, about a dozen or so. And we reached out to them. They were not on their mailing list. They were not in their CRM. They were just sort of waiting for that invitation to draw closer to the organization. and they're not going to do the work. They're not going to reach out to you. They're just going to keep coming and visiting and saying, we love you, we love you. It's your job to say we love you too. So if you see activity on your Facebook page or Twitter or the like, reach out to them and say, hi, I noticed you've been liking these types of posts. Would you like me to add you to our mailing list? Would you like an invitation to our event? That sort of thing. Again, bravo for the Facebook. Yep.
That's a really good tip. And if you're the only person doing work in your organization, it's something that a volunteer can do. It's something that an intern can do. If you give them sort of a template message and say, go,
right.
Make the relationship and the connection and then get that information.
That's right. Now, I want to say there may be other people on the line who, might get frustrated by Facebook. About 2 years ago, I think it was, Facebook changed the game for everyone, small business, nonprofits, everyone, so that not everyone sees your feed, even if they like and follow your page. There's a whole book out there about it. It's based on algorithms. It's based on, the simplest way I can say it is if you have a Facebook page and someone likes, let's say, your video, they're only going to get your video feed into their timeline when they're not going to get all your posts. So if you don't post another video that's similar, they may never see or interact with you again unless they take the effort to go to your page. So Facebook, LinkedIn's the same way. They're moving to really online advertisers more than anything. So I share this with you because I don't want you to get frustrated. Why does such and such organization have 13,000 followers and we've got 50? There's your answer. They may have been ahead of the curve before this change took place, or they may have a very aggressive online strategy, which is also really good to have.
Great. That's really good information. What is the most effective way to grow your audience for virtual events if you have a large audience?
To grow them for or through?
So if you have an event, I think this is what Jeff is saying. If you have a virtual event, how do you grow the attendance in that event?
Oh, I see. Just like you do when it's in person. As you know, and I don't know where you're coming from, Jeff, in terms of this country, I can tell you different cities have different cultures. New York, DC, we tend to, sign up very last minute for things, as in like the hour before. It's awful. And I wish I could change the culture of, investing in events, but I can't, not here in this area. So there's a little bit of that happens. I think it's the same old school stuff. I think you want to have your key people who are involved to share it on their social media. I like to do, so here's a little trade secret. We haven't talked about this yet. I think it will answer Jeff's question, but it's also something I want your broader audience to know. And that is, I like to, for each of my clients, find influencers for them. First of all, we cast the net within their existing network and say, okay, this person have huge social media followings. Let's move everybody over to the side for a sec. But what about these people? So for example, I'm working with a Korean American association, and I wanted to find out who are influencers in that space. And we are reaching out to them to ask them to help us. We're not asking for money. We're just asking for them to share information about our youth summit, to share information about some of the other projects that they have going on. So I would say, Jeff and everyone on the line, find out who your influencers are, because they amplify whatever message you're trying to send, and be very, very clear when you ask them to get engaged. So for example, when I send an email request to an influencer, I actually tell them if I'm asking them for a video to post, for example, I say, put your phone horizontal, make it 20 seconds or less, text it here or email it here. I leave no questions, because influencers get other requests, but they're also quite busy. But usually they don't think twice about it if it's a click for them. So find your influencers, make sure that the people involved in your organization feel great about it, so that they want to share what you're doing from the rooftop. I cannot tell you how frustrated I am alongside you with the, at times, lack of marketing that's happening from our constituents. But then I say, well, you know what? How have we equipped them? What tools have we given them? How have we reminded them? When I do campaigns, I send calendar invites. It's very annoying to work with me in that way, but I'm very organized that way. But just make sure that whenever you ask for help, that you're also making it super easy to say yes.
That's really helpful. So what about if your community has a disease that they don't talk about? It's stigmatized. Lori asks, are nonprofit members or families with children who have bowel and bladder issues, and these families are hesitant to share reasons as to why they're part of our organization. They don't want to affiliate formally or officially. And sometimes they are part of the organization, and sometimes they don't engage. How do you encourage these families to fundraise when they don't share the organization externally to their community?
Sure. Great question. And I tell you, I can share with you that I worked in the mental health space first in my career 21 years ago. And throughout my career, somehow I've ended up 7 years total in working with adults with schizophrenia. It's not a hot topic. And trust me, the family members of many of these clients, they would say, weren't really excited to stand out on the mountaintop and yell, my son has schizophrenia either. So it's a delicate subject. I think there's a couple of things here. So I would find a way to get to the story of that embarrassment. I would get to the story of the humiliation of no one wants, at the end of the day, of course there are bullies in the world, but we all want to protect anyone from being bullied. So I think the more you can capture the heart of what it feels like to live with that illness, and that maybe you know someone, or would they be willing to say, you know, this is a cause that affects my family and here's how it affects them. If you're looking for those heartstrings, I think obviously there are different types of donors. Most respond to heart, some respond to brain. So supplying the data around it would be really good too, not just nationally, but locally. You know, we all tend to feel it more when it affects us. But again, I'm going to just say this one more time because I'm not sure I made it clear enough, is tap into the feelings that it invokes more than the actual thing, right? So we do this all the time in creative marketing. I once had a house of women who were not born in this country who were victims of domestic violence, which is awful. But because they were not US citizens, we were struggling to get, this was years ago, donations for them. And so we said, wait a minute, their children are American born. So we actually changed the script and made it about serving the children. It was serving the cause. It was all, you know, on the up and up, but it's just changing how you frame it. Does that help? Do you think, Debbie?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 11 minutes left. I'm going to throw out 3 questions and you can decide because they're very different.
Okay.
How do you find an influencer? How best can LinkedIn be used to fundraise, or can it? And for a really rare disease where there just aren't that many patients, and I know one rare disease that has a nonprofit that has 10 patients in the world, what would be something we could do to expand the community?
Right. I just got chills when you mentioned that last one. I mean, again, we the philanthropic world, that's, I don't always look at I have 2 hats. I'm sure we all do, right? We're a nonprofit. I'm a philanthropist, I give, and then I'm also a fundraiser. So I feel things. And when someone says 10, I think, wow, talk about lonely and isolated. Talk about scared. Talk about what do I do? I think there are ways to get really creative around, you know, and I don't have the true answer on what you say, but I'm going to go back to the answer that I gave earlier. Why is 10 a small number, right? If it's affecting a human life, it's a big number, right? So I'm going to table that. You can call me. Maybe we could do a little brainstorming, but that's where my heart goes. That's where my mind goes when I'm thinking about how to tell that story. LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn has a lot of resources for nonprofits. Definitely look at what resources you can take advantage of. I have done more business And when I say business, I mean nonprofit business on LinkedIn than anything else. And I urge every one of you to make sure, when I mention that audit, make sure your LinkedIn is where it needs to be. Make sure your picture's recent. Make sure that your profile is recent. Throw photos on there. I don't think enough people do that. And throw an introductory message on there as well. Make it personal. And spend at least once a week managing all of your LinkedIn relationships. It's really, really worth it. Now, as far as crowdfunding and things like that on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn community is a little discerning, and you will get messages from LinkedIn folks that say, listen, I don't want you to contact me at all. Sorry. I don't want you to contact me about, a fundraiser that this is not Facebook, this is LinkedIn. So definitely know the audience that you're messaging. So when I am on LinkedIn, I tend to talk about information sharing or maybe conferences and events of that nature. I don't typically talk about, the Girl Scout cookie sale, for example. Nothing against that, by the way. Everybody loves a good cookie. But anyway, so LinkedIn, yes. And then the first question I forgot.
That's okay. How do you find an influencer?
I love this. So if there's any part of you that enjoys research, and I really, really do, you can just Google, who, this is a whiteboard opportunity too. And I do this with all the nonprofits that I work with. We spend quite a bit of time whiteboarding the relationships. Yes, I know it's all in the CRM, but I think sometimes you just have to get out of it and pull those names out and talk about them. But so in the space of this organization I mentioned earlier, I wanted to know everything from who has produced Korean-based movies to who are the champions in Korean history, to find lineage connections. I think that really the sky's the limit, but you're looking then anyway, when you get that list, then you want to see who's active, because it's just because they, for example, are a football player doesn't mean they have a big following. It doesn't mean that they're used to, going out there and people listen to what they have to say. As you know, there are some, I'll use the same thing, football. There are some football players who are really, really good, but they don't really have much of an audience. And then there are some that aren't even that great, but they have this massive audience. For my charity, would want the massive audience. So I think also every major city, if you live near one, has a city magazine. Washington has Washington Life and Business Journal and all those things. And typically they take photos of what's going on in the community. Now, right now, there's not a lot of events, but go back in time and look at who's in all the photographs. Who's that person that's going to everything? They're an influencer. They're someone who has a voice in the community. I know when I move into a new community, I always want to know who the town mayor is. And I'm not talking about the elected official. In every community, there's that leader who has a lot to say, and you want to be friends with them.
Thanks for that. But this is all very helpful, practical tips. We've got about 6 minutes left, and
Okay.
the subject for this webinar is virtual fundraising. And so there's a question about a board that has limited influence and access to high wealth individuals and how to move them into fundraising. Is there a way that virtual fundraising can do this for a board that is not as active or influential?
Great question. So your board you need your board now. And now is not the time for them to back up either. And I think you share with them what I said earlier, and that is people are watching. They're watching everything. And everything's easy to watch, right? Now that we're in this virtual space. We're recording this webinar. So 10 years from now, you'll be able to see that Heidi Webb told, someone that they should, find out who influencers are, for example. So in that vein, you want to make sure that your board member understands fully their job and their role as a board. But more importantly, I think what I found when board members don't give, I wrote look me up on LinkedIn. I wrote this article years ago that I still believe strongly in today. Don't throw the babies out with the bathwater. I think board members are achievers. They're on the board because you ask them to be on the board, but they also typically, I won't say all the time, but if their net worth is high and they're strong in the business community, they're high achievers. And what high achievers need is they need something to do, and they need all the resources there to be able to do it. So sometimes I left a board. I was on a board, a prestigious board, and I was there for 3 years, and I kept saying, "You're not using me. You're not using me." And actually, before I left, I had coffee with the executive director, and I said, "I feel useless. I'm a doer. I want to do." And it still didn't change. So I ended up amicably leaving the board saying, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and head out now." And it was an aha moment for me, because I thought, this is what I've been telling nonprofits for years. Give your board something to do. Don't give them the small stuff. Give them the big stuff, right? And get them engaged. They also want to trust you. So what I say to you is, find a way to really follow up as quickly as you can on any lead, reference, name drop that they give you. Follow up quickly on that. The other piece is to, really make sure that you are checking into I mentioned LinkedIn, or someone else mentioned LinkedIn. Check their LinkedIn. You don't go to a board meeting and say, who knows anybody? Give me your Rolodex. I've heard a lot of people send us give us all your people, right? And I don't know about you, but I don't want to give anyone my Rolodex. I've earned that Rolodex, and I like to make introductions warm, and I'm assuming that board members are the same. So it's very intimidating to hear, give us your list, give us your list, give us your list. Why don't you go find their list? Go to their LinkedIn profile, look at their contacts, make sure they're LinkedIn with you. Look at their contacts and say, if I could get them to introduce me to 3 people, who would I want them to introduce me to? So there's no question that they're connected to those 3 people. You don't have to go through that anymore. You can go say to them, Kenita, I noticed that you're connected with Merck Pharmaceutical, and I really need a contact there. We're submitting a grant in a couple of months, and your contact, Sarah, works there, and I'd really love a connection. In fact, I put together this template for you so that all you have to do is send it to Sarah from you, CC me, and we can take care of it from there. Doesn't that sound a lot easier than, hey, does anybody know anyone at Merck? Right?
Thanks so much, Heidi. That's such a classic question, and your response is really helpful. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for this webinar. We still have a lot more questions that are coming through, so we are going to wrap up this webinar. Many of you have shared that not only do you have challenges around fundraising and moving to virtual platforms, but crisis communication. That's the topic of our next webinar coming up. I'd like to thank our speaker and all of you for participating in this webinar. When the window closes, there will be a new window opening up with a survey. We would really like you to fill out that survey and let us know what you think about the speaker. Heidi, NORD's going to buy a book from you, and we're going to give it randomly to the people who fill out the survey responses. So if you didn't guess Mary Poppins, you still have a chance to get
it's wonderful.
one of Heidi's books. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that everyone on the line joins us in the next webinar on crisis communications, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we hope to see you in the future. Thanks so much, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. Be in touch. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.